Thank you so much for staying with us. We've been talking with Professor Chidi Odinkalo. You were talking about the nation's unity and the approach of President Buhari in dialoguing with militants in the Niger Delta region.
Yeah, I was trying to say, look, the JTF has been in the Niger Delta for 22 years. In that period, we've also increased the number of divisions in the Nigerian Navy from 2 to 3. So, in addition to the Western Naval Command and Eastern Naval Command, we now have a Central Naval Command. Of the 3 divisions, 2 are in the Niger Delta. As a matter of fact, we've created a 6th division of the Nigerian Army, which is supposed to be in the Niger Delta. Now, all this increase in militarization has not necessarily led to peace in the Niger Delta. On the contrary, the situation has got worse, which probably suggests that we need to change tack. So I think it's not a bad thing that the president has decided to mix carrot and stick. In the hope that it's going, but I think it's going to be more than carrot and stick. It's got to also be better politics, better delivery for the people, a better deal for the people from the politicians. And the question is, are the politicians willing to offer a better deal to the people of the Niger Delta?
You look at, on one hand, the issue of the Niger Delta militancy that's crippled the nation's oil production, the mainstay of our economy, and you look on the other hand, in some parts of the north-central region of the country, herdsmen, attacks and all of that. Today, we've seen another attack in Benue State that's happened in Plateau State, happened in Nasarawa State, and we've seen that happen in that region. And one will be wondering, again and again, the debates over ranches, over grazing bill, and all of that. Legally, what suits our nation the most between these two school of thoughts?
Look, I could keep you here for a long time on this subject matter, and we don't have all that time. But let me try and explain as quickly as I can. There is a mix of factors. We've got very irresponsible politics, and this is not PDP or APC. Both parties don't seem to get it. Yes? And both parties have treated our people as if they are expendable. Now, we've got a situation that is going to get worse unless the politicians change their game. Why do I say so? You have the desert, right? Climate change is the huge factor here. It has driven herds and people from the Sahelian fringes of Nigeria, and they're coming down south. Water sources are drying up, land is drying up, grazing is drying up, and they're coming down south to sources of water. But when they come down south, if I'm a Muslim or a Christian and I'm going with my herds, I'm not going to leave my faith behind or my way of living behind, so we carry everything. And we travel with everything we've got. The problem is that we had in northern Nigeria, in the states of northern Nigeria, we had about 453 designated grazing reserves. Now, by the way, what's the difference between a ranch and a grazing reserve? That's not very clear in my view. People here say ranches. No poor person owns a ranch. Yes? A lot of the herdsmen are not rich people. Now, you want them to go and acquire ranches and live there. I don't think that's going to happen. There was very excellent policy rationale for the establishment of grazing reserves in the old northern region. There were about 453 at the minimum that were designated. Of that number, about 13% of them were actually gazetted. What's happened is that politicians in many states have gone and taken the grazing reserves and converted them to private estates. If we actually, now I'm not saying that all the grazing reserves were enough, but if we actually could bring together the collection of grazing reserves we had, that was very substantial land with which to begin to address the situation. We didn't do that. We allowed the politicians to steal the land, and in many places, in parts of Kebbi State, for instance, the theft led to the killing of people. So I think the first thing we've got to do, let's get back the reserves we have. Whether we call them ranches or we call them reserves, the important thing is that they provide for possibilities for communal care for the herds. And you can allocate them and govern access to them in a manner that makes sense. If we don't do this, what are we going to have? As climate change continues, the Lake Chad in 50 years, from 1963 to now, has shrunk from 25,000 square kilometers to 2,500 kilometers, and it is shrinking further. Right? A lot of sources of water in that region are gone. Now you're coming to the Nigerian savannah, which is really the middle belt, where you've got the bodies of water. And that is where the conflict is. And what's happening, the conflict in the northeast and this livelihood conflict are over grazing rights are all coming together in one place. And our national capital is that we've got to be more responsible than this. We're not.
All right. It takes me to, I mean, I won't, you won't be on the set, and I won't be able to, I will not allow you to go until I take you up on some legal issues in the nation. It gets some of us confused at some point. Some of these issues that come now and then. The National Assembly and the executive, the kind of relationship that we now see. For example, the forgery allegation that's gone to court now, the issues of separation of powers and all of that. What do you make of what is happening? Some will say it's a prosecution of one arm of government. Do you see so?
Look, I'm not in government. I'm not a government lawyer. I'm not a lawyer for the National Assembly. I don't have the facts or evidence on the basis of which the prosecution is gone on. So, and I don't, it's before the courts. I don't want to speculate as to what is happening. So on the specific facts, I don't have a view because I don't have adequate information on which to have a view. But let me say this. Shortly, Nigeria will be 55 years. In the 55 years, we've had an executive for 55 years, a judiciary for 55 years, and a legislature for about just a little over half of that. Because for the 29 years that we were under military rule, the legislature was abolished. So the legislature is the least developed, least evolved, and least regarded arm of our government. That, I think, is a major factor in this, because a lot of the politicians in executive authority don't take our legislature seriously. And that's a shame, because the legislature is the place where the people meet in a government. And I'm one of the people who I take the view that I think the Attorney General was wrong, Federal Attorney General was wrong, when he declined to appear before the National Assembly when they invited him. He doesn't have to agree with the National Assembly. Honestly, he doesn't have to like them. But you see, it's an institution of Nigerians. And when the National Assembly invites you, go and tell them you object. Go and tell them it is wrong to invite you. But don't stay outside and tarnish them. Yes, you're prosecuting them, you're doing that as Attorney General. But as Justice Minister, you can show up before them. Because you're a cabinet